I'm just really excited to be able to bring the word this morning. My name is Mike. I am on our Next Gen team. I'm one of the pastors on our Next Gen team. And we're about to dig into James. You guys ready? Yeah, are you guys ready? Online, are you ready? I hope so. We are in James chapter 4, and we're talking this morning about decisions. How many of you guys out here, you would love to learn how to make better decisions? Like, make some noise if you would love to learn how to make better decisions, right? A lot of you guys, right? Listen, if you've ever lived to tell the tale of a hold my beer moment, like this message is for you, all right? Maybe not beer, maybe Sprite, maybe Coke, Dr. Pibb, whatever. Like this message is for you. But also I know for some of you in here, maybe you just got out of a relationship that wasn't the best and you're like, man, Mike, I don't ever want to do that again. Like this message is for you. Maybe you're a parent and to get your kids to come to church was a struggle. I mean, you were in the back and the kids were just screaming. You were like, shut up, you're gonna like it, and you're just trying to figure out, how do I get my kid to love Jesus? This message is for you. Maybe you're a senior. Any seniors, college students, seniors, juniors in here? Make some noise. Come on, make some noise. Come on, this is awesome, right? Like good to, I'm so glad that you're here with us. Maybe you're a senior and you're trying to figure out, what in the world am I going to do next? Like there's a lot of opportunities, but God, what's your will on that? This message is for you. Maybe you're a high school senior, and I know that this past week was one of the best and worst weeks of the year because a lot of schools kind of made it clear who was in and who was out. And so maybe your favorite school wasn't necessarily in favor of you attending, and now you're like, what in the world do I do? Like my mind, your world is kind of crashing. This message is for you. But the sober part of where James is going this morning is he would say that this message on how to make great decisions isn't just for you, and it's not just for me, it's for us. Because what he would say is, whether you believe so or not, we are worse planners than we realize. We are so bad at making plans. So we're talking about decisions this morning. See, what James would say is you might be able to now recognize the pain and arrogance and tragedy behind your decisions. But what James would say is it's not enough to just know how you got into these decisions, but he would say, hey, do you even know how you got there? What I love about where we're going today is that James is in chapter 4, he's not only going to tell us how we get to bad decisions, but he's going to give us some sound advice so that we don't continue to make bad decisions. If you would stand up with me, we're going to be in chapter 4, starting in verse 13, and we're talking about decisions. Look at you ever say decide. Decision. Starting in verse 13, it goes like this. Come now, you who say today or tomorrow we will go into such and such a town, spend a year there, trade and make a profit. Yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you are a mist. In some translations, it says you are a vapor that is here for a little time and then vanishes. What you ought to say is, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. As it is, you boast in your arrogance, and all such boasting is evil. So whoever knows the right thing to do, look at your neighbor, say the right thing. Whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him it is sin. Let's pray. Jesus, help us to not sin. Amen. Everybody say amen. Amen. Go ahead and air five your neighbor and say, let's do this. Let's do this. This morning, I'm talking about decisions. And when I think about decisions, I can't help but think about one of my favorite movies of all time, childhood movie, like favorite. It's this movie called Sandlot. Does anybody know what I'm talking about when I say Sandlot? Anybody like, man, this is the movie. It's right up there with what I would say, maybe some of you guys don't know because you're all into Karate Kid. This would be something like Three Ninjas. Anybody remember that? Three Ninjas. Tom. This would be up here with D3 Mighty Ducks. This would be up this movie that called Bebe's Kids that somehow I just loved, right? Like this is up there with that. Like thank you, give me the clap, come on. Some of you guys like, what in the world is that? But this is one of my favorite movies. If you're not familiar with this movie, it centers around a kid named Smalls. And Smalls moves into a new neighborhood and he meets kind of like a older teenager / mentor named Benny. And Smalls doesn't really have any friends. Benny has a lot of friends, and so Benny kind of introduces him to the friendship group. This friendship group loves to play baseball. The problem is that Smalls is terrible at baseball, and so along the journey, you see Benny and the group teaching him how to catch, how to bat, how to swing, and eventually he gets good at it. One of the days he's playing with this group, and one of the kids, he's up at bat, and the one baseball that he has, or that they're playing with, he hits a home run with. Now that sounds like a good news, but the challenge, or even just like what they talked about, kind of like the unspoken rules of the game, is like, hey, hit it far, but don't let it go over the fence. And so they're left in this predicament. They're like, man, what in the world do we do? Because if we can't find another baseball, the game is done for today. And so Smalls, being new to the group, he remembers that there's a baseball at his house. It's his stepdad's baseball. And so he's like, hey guys, like I got a baseball. And so he runs home and he grabs the baseball that is behind a case and that has a signature on it that we'll get into later. You guys get where I'm going. And he goes back out and he plays baseball with the kids, and they're like, hey, you should go first. You should bat first because you kind of saved the day. And so this kid, Smalls, is up at bat, and on his first time, he hits the ball for a home run. The problem is when he hits the home run, it goes over a fence into a dog's mouth and in a yard of a man that is legendary for not being nice, not being kind, and kind of being like a ghost. And so the whole story, the way the whole story unravels is this group of friends trying to put together plans and, kind of put together all these different things to somehow retrieve this ball. And in the process, they end up kissing a lifeguard. They end up talking about each other. You play baseball like a girl. They end up going crazy like that. But at the end of the day, none of their plans work. All of their plans fail, and they're left to knock on the owner's door. The owner comes out, and what they realize is that this owner is not like what they thought. They thought that this owner was mean, but he was actually kind. They thought that the owner of this house was a ghost, but he was very much alive. They thought this owner was lame, but he actually loved to play baseball. And as this owner is starting to make sense of the chaos that was ensuing, when he starts to realize that the fence was torn down, when he starts to realize that there's chaos in lives that have been ruined, he looks at the group of teenagers that are now like, oh my gosh, what in the world are we doing? He looks at them and he says these words. He says, guys, why didn't you just knock on the door? He's like, you did all these plans. You came up with all these strategies. Why didn't you just knock on the door? The challenge that where we're going today is the same look on the teenager's face, because in that moment, they looked at each other and they started to play out all the bad and crazy and wrong and destructive decisions. And it was almost like an aha moment where they looked at each other and they were like, man, if only we knew who was behind the fence, it would have saved us so much trouble. The same thing for us. Where we're going today when it comes to decisions, the only way we're going to get decisions right is to know who's behind the fence. In the same way, if we only understood who was behind the details of our life, it would change everything. Look at your neighbor and say decisions. How do we make great and better decisions? Here's what I need you to know this morning is that you and I, we all have a fence. You and I and we and us, we all online, we all have a fence. Just like the story on this side of the fence represents the daily decisions that we make every single day. On the other side is the plans, the good, perfect, pleasing will of God that is great, that is available to us, but it's in a future sense. Here's the thing. Here's why today matters and our decisions matter, and why our decisions at times can be just so destructive and they can cause ruin, they can destroy lives. The reason why this matters is because the decisions that we make on this side determines whether they are life or death on that side. See, we're not just talking about some baby decisions. We're talking about the decisions that that change lives. We're talking about the decisions like this missionary culture that mobilizes people to hear the name of Jesus. Your decisions matter. See, the decisions we make on this side will breathe life or death on that side. So we have more at stake than we've realized. And so the question here today is, how do we make great decisions? How do we plan appropriately? Write this down. Point number one, James would say that the problem starts with our presumptions. The problem starts with our presumptions. Verse 13, it says, come now, you who say today or tomorrow we will go into such and such a town and we'll spend a year there and we'll trade and we'll make a profit, yet you do not know what tomorrow brings. It's so funny to me because I don't know if you're like me, but the first time reading this in a while, all I saw was the sin in verse 16 and all such boasting is evil, but I failed to see the sin in verse 13. See, there's a problem that we have, and it's our presumption. See, at first glance, we look at this and we're like, man, that statement, I'm a business owner, I'm a student that likes to achieve, that likes to plan, that likes to think ahead. Like, how is that statement foolish? How is it boastful? How is it sinful? Think about it this way. One of the reasons why I love Sandlot is because it kind of reminds me of my childhood. And I know if you're a teenager, you don't get outside, you don't do that anymore. But there was once a time where people would go and play flag football in the streets, and they would play touching the streets and tackling the grass. And there's a time where your neighborhood would go to different neighborhoods and you would compete them. You would come up with a team name, or maybe if you weren't creative, you would just use your street address as your name, and you would go and challenge other people in different sports. There was a time, and so when I look at Sandlot, it reminds me of this time. And I remember my friends, we would get together, and right before school let out, we would get together and we would plan our summer. And so we would kind of come with our calendars. We didn't really have cell phones then. We'd come with our calendars and we would kind of mark like, hey, on Mondays, because we couldn't really use dates, we were going to get lost in that. So say on Mondays, we're going to go to the pool. On Tuesdays, we're going to run up to Kmart. On Wednesdays, we're going to challenge this. We're going to challenge this other neighborhood. On Thursdays, we're going to, we're going to do such and such. On Fridays, we're going to spend the night at such and such's house, and we're just going to kind of do that. And we would come together with all these plans. I was like, okay, guys, well, what are we going to do about it? And it's like, well, we're just going to tell our parents what we're going to do. And I was like, oh, that works? I was like, is that possible? And so I remember, they would go to their parents and they would ask whatever, or they would tell them, and they would come back. I was like, hey, did it work? They was like, yeah. I was like, okay, well, I'm going to try with my mama. Go to my mom, open the door, like, Mom, check this out. Here's the schedule. Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays. You don't got a problem with it, right? Guess what Mom did? Mom looked at me like, boy, who in the world do you think you're talking to? You think I'm one of these kids, right? Like, that's my mom. And when you get older, what you realize is that the problem didn't rest in the plans. What James would say and what my mom would say is that the problem rested in our misplaced confidence. See, what James is looking at is like, hey, when we talk about plans, the problem isn't that we go into a town and we spend a year there and we make a profit and we trade. That's not the problem. The problem is this misplaced confidence that we have, because it says, hey, yet you don't even know what tomorrow is going to bring. Especially in this early culture, it was really known that Jewish business owners would be profitable. Like, their businesses were extremely profitable. And so during this time, as James is writing, there's new cities that are getting developed, almost like South Florida and in Florida, like new cities just on top of each other. And so what these city officials would do is they would go to all of the Jewish business owners and say, hey, come and hang out with us, spend a year there, trade, and make a profit, and we'll be a win-win. We'll drive up the economy, but you're going to make a ton of money too. And so what they would do is they wouldn't necessarily go to God or ask God. They would just say, hey, that sounds good. But James would say, hey, the sinfulness in this is that it's misplaced confidence. Have you forgotten who's on the other side of the fence? Have you forgotten who gives you your breath? Have you forgotten who orchestrates your steps? Like, have you forgotten? See, the problem is not our planning, it's our presumptions. You know, I was trying to think about, like, how in the world did we get here? Why are we like this? And to be honest with you, I think this is kind of like the American blind spot for us. I think if we're honest, when we think back to grade school and we think back, kind of growing up, I mean, this was kind of like the thing. It was kind of like, hey, follow your heart, right? Like, this is the thing where we would say, hey, follow your dreams. Like, you can do it, right? Like, this was kind of like the thing. And in some ways, we were raised to believe that we're the masters of our destiny. See, we live in this world, this American, like, kind of standard that perpetuates the self-made man. We tell people to believe in the power of their dreams and the value of their hard work. We raise teenagers to follow their hearts. We say, hey, boo-boo, like, follow your dreams. You can do it, right? And while we would say that's noble and that's somewhat okay advice, what James is saying is that it's a sign of a person who is presumptuous and doesn't understand his or her place in the story. See, verse 14, what is your life? For you are a vapor. You are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. See, James, if you follow the trend last week, we talked about, like, what starts fights, what continues quarrels, right? And he says the answer to that is humility. What James is doing is he's continuing the humility trend into our planning. You want to make great decisions? You got to learn how to think rightly of yourself and rightly of God. See, the challenge is as long as you believe that you're on this side, that it's your will be done, you will never make the decisions that line up with God's will and his flourishing and his uniqueness and how he's wired you. See, I think the first step, even for us, is to understand that there's something in all of us that wants to be on that side of the fence. And I'm right, like, we want to plan. We want to hold the destinies in our hands. But it's our presumptions that prevent us from really experiencing the fullness of God's design. We see this in relationships. We see this, I talk to a lot of college students that are like, Mike, we got to talk. And I'm like, what's going on? It's like, man, all of my friends are in relationships. And so what we do is, instead of going to God about it, we say, relationships. We're kind of like cavemen, and like, we want relationships, and we kind of go after it, right? We look at finance, and I'm talking to some people about finance, and talking about the stock market, and they're like, man, bro, listen, you got to invest in GameStop. And so what we do is, instead of going to God about it, what do? We move in our presumptions, our confidence, right? And we're like, man, I'm just gonna buy a whole bunch of stock in GameStop only to find that you can't sell it now. And we go back to God, and it's like, man, why you did that? God's like, no, that was you, bro. That was you. You thought GameStop was, whatever. But you guys get what I'm saying when it comes to our decisions? See, there's a lot on the line, and it begins with the problem of our presumptions. See, maybe you're starting a business, maybe you're dating this person, you just jumped into a relationship, maybe you're buying a house, maybe you're investing this money. Maybe you're like, man, Mike, you just don't understand. I got this journal since I was 12 years old, Mike. I was dreaming about my life. I was making plans for my life. That might be great. The plans might be awesome. But James would say, did you run those plans by God? See, here's the big idea of today, and here's where we're going. It's simply this: great decision making is less about how hard we plan and more about in whom we trust. You want to learn how to make great decisions? Great decision making is less about how hard we try, how hard we plan, and more about in whom we trust. See, Proverbs 14:12, and I want us to even put Proverbs 14:12 up. And I want us to say this together. Ready? 1, 2, 3. There is a way that seems right to man, but in its end is the way to death. Let's say that again, one more time. There is a way that seems right to man, but in its end is the way to what? Say that with me, is the way to what? Death, right? Listen to me. There is a way. I need you knowing, like when it comes to your planning, there is a way that seems right. But in its end, it's the way to death. Man, you're like, man, Mike, but it just feels right. There is a way. Oh man, Mike, this decision, it seems go. There is a way. See, the beauty of where we're going is that there is a way that seems right, but it leads to death. But there is a way that is right, and it leads to life. There is a way that seems right, and it always leads to death. But there is a way that is right, that will always give you the life that you need. See, point number one is that the problem is not our planning, but it's our presumptions. See, we have plans. There is a way. We have plans in us. We got to admit that we have plans. We got to admit that when it's come with college student at UF, listen, some of you guys, don't lie to me. You come to UF and you spent your entire life making plans to get to UF for you to tell me like, Mike, I don't got no more plans. You know, I'm just going through life. No. Like there's a part of all of us, we have plans. Can you even just say that? We have plans. Kind of like an A meeting, like the first step is admitting. It's like we have plans. But point number two, God has a will. See, we have plans, but God, he has a will. You know, when I think of will, I can't help but think of just like when you build things. And my wife and I, we love IKEA. Anybody like IKEA out there? Make some noise. Anybody online, you like IKEA? Come on. And so my wife and I, we love IKEA. We love building things. And so we'll take, all these different things home and we'll build the different projects and stuff in the house. And my wife and I, we kind of disagree on how things should be built. See, I believe that instructions don't matter. Like I believe that all that matters is the picture on the box. Anybody said? Hey, come on, somebody. Come on, right? It's so funny. All the ladies are like, I'm not with you right now, right? But for me, it's like, hey, as long as I look at the picture on the box, I'll be great. I'll be good, you know? And so my wife is like, hey, you're not going to look at the instructions. I was like, no. Like, baby, I'm a man. I'm a man, you know? And so she's like, whatever, you know, and she goes into another room so we don't get in an argument. And so I'm working on this piece, and I'm building IKEA's masterpiece, and I'm looking at the picture on the box, and when I'm done, I stand back and I'm like, that looks good. The problem is my wife comes out and she sees a whole bunch of extra pieces on the ground, and she's like, Mike, what's that? And I was like, baby, like those are extras. Like those are for people that build. That's not me, you know, like that's extra. She's like, whatever, you know. And she's like, Mike, you need to put those pieces there. And I was like, no, like, it's okay. Like, listen, it looks like the picture on the box, it should be good. The problem is that a couple of months go by and IKEA's masterpiece ends up being IKEA's broken piece. And what was intended to be used for a lifetime was only able to be used for a season. See, IKEA has a will. How do I tap into that will? I pick up IKEA's instructions. See, what I learned and what I hope you would discover is that it's impossible to build IKEA's masterpiece without IKEA's instructions. And in the same way, it's impossible for you to actually, as God is creator and we are his masterpiece, it's impossible for us to actually flourish without actually getting into his will. See, he has a will. See, we have plans. Come on. We have plans, but God, he has a will. He has a will. I'm telling you, man, like there's nothing like partnering with God's will. There's nothing that satisfies your heart like God's will. Like, even thinking about our missionaries here, like, man, like I knew Brennan when, you know, before he was even on the mission field, we were kind of like hanging out in Jackson. I remember him talking about like just all the things he wanted to do. It's like, hey, And it's cool to see where he is right now because it's like, man, God, you were faithful in his life. Like you were faithful he was faithful with the little and you began to expand it. See, God has a will. It's funny for me because when we talk about God's will, we think that our current space and where we are is untouchable. It was like, well, Mike, I'm in this career. That's God's will, right? If it's not, he'll help me along the way, which he will. But I got to be honest with you. For some of you graduated your undergrad, and before you graduated, God was prompting on your heart that you were supposed to live a life on mission, that you were supposed to go to the nations, that you were supposed to be in full-time ministry, that God had this thing that he was asking for you to birth, and what did you do? You let it die. So you got to ask the question, like, hey, are you in God's will? See, the way I would find out if I'm in IKEA's will is by using IKEA's instructions. Have you taken time to ask God, like, hey, am I in your will? Am I in your will when it comes to this relationship? But God, I love him. He just means so much to me. God, did you see what he did for me for Valentine's Day? He got me a flower. He got me some candy. You know, like, it's so funny, man. We are so, like, it's like we clench into things, right? We hold into things, and God's like, hey, I didn't do that. See, we have plans, but God has a will. It's so funny, Gen Z and millennials, and I talk to my friends, so I know it's true, but they would say that millennials are statistically prone to move job positions, not just like even companies, 12 times before the age of 30. And so what we've done is we learned that, like, hey, it's really hard for us to have upward mobility within a company. And so what we do is we end up settling by going to this company and that company and that company and that company. And we never really stop to ask God, is that your will? Man, if I could be honest with you, I come from a single, like, mom household. And, you know, I came to college, yes, because I was driven, but another part was because I wanted to take care of my mom. You know, my parents got divorced when I was in 9th grade, and my mom, who was not working, had to go and work 2 jobs, and I had to watch that, and she always provided. There was always food on the table, and she always did her thing. And so I get to college, and I'm like, man, I got to make sure I go into this career, and I got to make sure I do this thing, and I got to make sure I do that, because at the end of the day, I got to make enough money so that my mom will be taken care of. That's not bad at all. But it might not be God's will. See, the beautiful part about being in God's will is that he takes care of his kids. I'm telling you, man, some of you're like, man, I got to be a part of this organization. I got to have this affiliation. I got to be Blue Key. I got to be in a fraternity. I got to do I need the network. Listen, God is the greatest network we can have. Come on. Like, it is. Like, God's network is huge, right? It's expansive. He has all the connections. There's nothing like being connected to God's will. The problem with his will is that it's easier to just say it with lips. It's harder to live out. You know, Missionary Sam, how many of you guys know Missionary Sam? Make some noise, come on. Online, Missionary Sam is amazing, and he's with us a couple of times a year. And I remember when I first started following Jesus, I would just kind of watch how he interacted in conversations. And people would get around Missionary Sam and they would say, hey, you know, Missionary Sam, so here's the plan. You know, can you go here? Can you go there? And he would always respond with, God willing, you know. And I was like, what? He's like, hey, you want to come to dinner? God willing. You want to, what are you wearing? Like, I don't know, God willing. You know, I'm like, what in the world? And so as a young person that's trying to follow Jesus, I'm like, oh my gosh, he's amazing. I mean, literally, he would be in the office and he would, like, you know, when he talk about pray without ceasing, like literally, you know, you would see Missionary Sam, he's just like, I was like, oh my gosh, this man is a G, you know? And so I started to model that. And you know, it lasted for about 4 months. My friends would get around and was like, hey, what are you doing, Mike? I was like, you know, I don't know, but I mean, God willing, we can, you know. And after 4 months, I just stopped it because you know what? Like, I realized that even though I was saying it with my lips, I couldn't actually get it to go deep enough into my actions that it might be true. See, God's will it's not just a new law, it takes a new heart. It takes a new heart. See, when we flesh this out, James is saying, hey, what you ought to say is, if the Lord wills, we will live and we will do this or that. Two things about these two statements. Number one, we will live. What James is doing is he's asking for us to recognize God's sovereignty over it all. See, when you say we will live, it's recognizing that we are a mist here for a little while and then vanishes. It's recognizing that God has been here forever. Everything within me wants to do the Sandlot ref, forever, right? It's recognizing that he's been here forever and he has perspective that you do not have. And because of that, it's choosing to partner with his perspective. It's choosing to partner with his mind and to partner with his will. But here's the second part, do this or that, which recognizes our submission to his plans and not our own. It's recognizing that God actually has a will. It's realizing that your plans won't change his. And even when we want to, it's reminding ourselves that his way is way better and his timing is perfect. See, we have plans, but God has a will. You know, I just got off a vacation, and I gotta be honest with you, this message was pretty challenging because I was like, man, I want to be able to rest. My wife was like, hey, make sure you get your stuff done before we go on vacation. I was like, yes, ma'am. You know, she has a will, you know. There's a will, there's a way, you know. But we ended up going on vacation, and we just ended up relaxing for a few days, and we were off for a week. And to be honest with you, this season has been really busy for my wife. She's a part-time worship leader up here, and then she's also a realtor. And I was like, man, my big part, like my heart just wants her to rest. It just wants her to have the vacation of her dreams. And so we had plans to go to California back in October, but Corona, and we're just like, we're not going there, you know? And so we kind of canceled our flight tickets, and we just decided to stay local. After we kind of cleaned the house and we're hanging out, we were just like, hey, we should go somewhere. And so Saturday, we just kind of looked at the map of Florida and was like, hey, we haven't been to Sarasota. Let's go to Sarasota. You know, anybody from Sarasota out there? You know, it's beautiful, man. I love that area, man. That was kind of cool. I was like, gosh, just great people, you know, good food, great beach, right? And so we're on the way there, and I'm starting to stress out because I ain't make no plans, y'all. I ain't book a hotel. I don't even know the map of the city. I'm like, and the other thing is I don't even know my wife's will on this vacation. I was like, hey, baby, do you want to stay at the beach? Do you want to stay by shopping? Because what we discovered on our vacations that sometimes we want to rest and just not do anything, and sometimes we like to explore. And so if we want to explore, we're not at the hotel the entire time. Why spend a bunch of money to not be there, right? But if we want to hang out by the beach, then yeah, we can go up. We can get something nicer. But she's not giving me any answers. I'm not really asking, but, you know, I'm looking at her, you know, you kind of get those hints like, you know. And I'm telling you, by the time we make it, we're in Sarasota, and we're sitting in a hotel parking lot, and I am frustrated. I am so frustrated. I'm frustrated at this vacation. I'm frustrated at these plans. I'm frustrated at my wife because I feel like she's not telling me. And I remember this moment. I felt like God was just like, hey, Mike, these are your plans. These aren't my plans. And you don't even know her plans. Why don't you just ask her? I was like, yeah, God, that makes sense. I was like, I'm asking everybody. I'm asking friends, like, hey, where do you think we should go? But I never actually asked my wife. And I said, baby, like, what do you want to do? Where do you want to stay? Do you want to stay by the beach? Do you want to stay in town? And she looks back at me, and she says, Mike, to be honest with you, I just want to be with you. I know, so sweet, right? She says, Mike, to be honest with you, we could be at a beach. We could be in the city. We could be on a hill. We could be in the mountains. We could sleep in the car. Maybe not that one, but it doesn't matter. The trick is I just want to be with you. See, if I wanted to know her will, I had to do what? To ask. See, if the problem is presumption, If it's misplaced confidence, the answer is involvement. It's asking God. See, we have plans, but God has a will. See, we long to be disciples who follow Jesus, but I got to tell you, Jesus only did what he saw the Father doing. He only went where the Father told him to go. You know, there's this cool moment in Luke 8 where Jesus, he instructs the disciples to go to the other side of the lake. Well, Mike, he didn't say if the Lord wills, but you know what he did? Before he ever did that, he went and connected with the Father to get his will. See, if you want to know his will, you just gotta ask. See, the problem is our presumptions. The answer is involvement. Proverbs 16:3 says, commit your work to the Lord and your plans will be established. So how do we run our businesses? We run them with God. How do we plan our vacations? We plan it with God. I need to learn that one. How do we parent our kids? We parent with God. How do we lead our micro churches, our discipleship groups? We do so with God. How do we navigate important decisions in our life? We do so with God. How do we decide retirement and savings and that balance? We do it by planning with God. See, great decision making is not based around how hard we try, but it's in whom we trust. See, we may just be a small drop in a large ocean, but you have a creator who loves us and sees it all. See, the great news is if you follow Jesus, you don't have to be the mastermind of your life anymore. You just simply got to get connected with the master and allow him to give you his mind. See, imagine what could happen if the next time you did strategic planning for your company, for your family, for your life, you invited the King of Kings. The best strategy ever. You're a business leader, you can hold the door open. You say, hey guys, wait, we got one extra spot. It's the King of Kings. Well, what's he gonna bring? Everything. Man, what if the next time you planned your vacation, you got alone with the Father first and you said, God, what's your will? What if the next time you had your interview, you're getting ready for your interview in all these different locations, before you even jump into the interview, you say, God, is this your will? See, the answer of our presumptions, it's involvement. See, the problem is not our planning, but it's our presumption. The solution is God's will. It's involvement, which means the only way we can move forward, and here's where I want to land it today, is number 3, is that we might live a life that says, may your will be done. Can we even just say that right now? Say, may your will be done. Say that again. May your will be done. Like even right now, close your eyes right now. Think about your life right now, because I believe that God has something special for you. Close your eyes. Think about your plans. Think about your life. Think about the decisions that you make. You're like, man, Mike, it seems right to me. All plans in our minds seem right, but there is a way. May your will be done. Even just take 30 seconds. Even right now, if you're online, take 30 seconds right now and say, God, may your will be done. Like I mean, right now, just take 30 seconds. May your will be done. May your will be done. See, James 4:15 says, what you ought to say is, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. How in the world will we know that? We ask him. John 10:27 says, my sheep hear my voice, and I know them and they follow me. Proverbs 3:5-6 says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him and he will make your path straight. See, disciples of Jesus, don't miss this, don't miss this, don't miss this. Don't make the mistake of planning without God. See, sometimes our will is going to be his will. But even when it's not, man, some of you guys are like, man, Mike, I was talking with a couple even this morning who at the end of the first prayer, they were kind of like in their 3rd trimester and they just found out that their baby has a heart defect. And they're like, man, God, like we've been waiting to have kids, and then all of a sudden now that we do, it just seems like our world is crashing. Kind of like the same time that they found out this news, she found out that her mom was sick and had passed away. Like, that's tough. Because when we look at the details of our life, a lot of us, when we hear crashing news like that, we want to do everything we can to get on the other side and to plan our wills so that they may be done. What do you do? How do you How do you respond to someone when it's face to face with tragedy? Jesus says that in this life, we will face disappointment of all kinds. I think the lie that the world tells you, or even the enemy tries to betray over to you when you follow Jesus, is that everything is going to be butterflies and unicorns and green lights. But Jesus says to follow me, you got to pick up your cross, deny yourself, and come after me. So he says, in this life, you will have heartache, but take heart, for I have overcome the world. I've overcome. Which means when my will matches his will, that sounds great. And when my will doesn't match his will, I take heart, for he knows exactly what I need. Like my mom, since I was a little kid, has had ailing issues. We would celebrate one win only to discover one loss. And so many times I was like, man, God, do something about it. Would you just heal my mom? And he hasn't yet healed my mom completely, but I got to tell you the story that was created in the process. I remember sitting in a hospital with my mom. She's on a breathing machine, and she's not responsive. And the doctors are like, hey, we can't get our oxygen levels up. And we're like, hey, it might be time to be, kind of make some tough decisions. And I remember me getting a chance to gather with my family. And for the first time, I had prayed and laid out prayer with my family. And the next day, God responds and her oxygen levels go up. I've seen things with my mom. I think I said this last time, where my mom, she was kind of recovering, and the job said, hey, if you can't come back, we got to terminate your job. It's past the time. And she trusts the Lord, and she's like, man, Mike, I'm just going to pray to the Lord. I'm going to ask for him to respond. And she wakes up the next day, and she drives to the job, and she knocks on the door, and she says, hey, I'm here, let me in. And they let her in. Why? Because it just so happened that the same day that she knocks on the door, it's the same day that they found out that one of the other workers that was there was on maternity leave, and so they needed help. See, I'm telling you, I can't promise you that God is going to match your will with his will every single time, but check this out. If you delight yourself in him, he's going to give you the desires of your heart. I can't tell you that everything is going to be unicorns and butterfly. I can't tell you that you're not going to get rejected from another school, that you're not going to have disappointment, but listen, when you get him, you get it all. And I would rather follow his will than spend my life climbing for mine. See, may your will be done. James 4:16, and if we can get someone out on the keys, James 4:16, it warns against our arrogance. James says that as it is, you boast in your arrogance, and all such boasting is evil. Why would he say that? Maybe because he recognizes that we don't always live like a good father is on the other side of our fence. And if we're honest, we would say that, hey, honestly, we believe that if it was up to our decisions, we should be on the other side of our fences. See, what's your blind spot? Because James says you must own the fact that you like to plan. You must own the fact that you have a way, that you have presumptions. But you also must own the fact that God has a will. What's your blind spot? What's the parts of your life where you would say, God, I can't put that in your hands. I have to take it upon mine. Maybe it's sex outside of marriage. Maybe you're like, man, Mike, I just don't see it. I just don't really think it lines up with the Bible. There's desires that I got to activate. I just don't think that one woman is enough. Maybe that's your blind spot. Maybe it's control. Maybe you're a parent, and the moment you had your kid, you lifted them up like Simba, and you're like, Simba, and you had these amazing plans for your kid's life, but to be honest with you, you never really asked God, what's your will for his or her life? And so what you do is you're stressing your kids out, but because you're putting demands on them that was never meant for them. You get more frustrated when they didn't get into the school than they do. It's like, man, like maybe that's something that you need to put down tonight. Maybe you're a high school senior and you didn't get into the school that you were looking forward to. Can I be honest with you? If you belong to Jesus, he's not going to withhold the good he has for you. Maybe it's your blind spot where you grew up thinking like, as long as if I work hard enough, if I do the things that I need to do, God's going to provide. See, can I be honest with you? Can we just stop allowing vapor-like people to define morality for us? Can we stop allowing vapor-like people to define wisdom for us? It's like, man, when we want advice, we go to this person and that person, or to this source or that source, and they never really get us across the fence to the things that we need. See, God is a good father. And so much of our disappointment has been because we've allowed vapor-like people to take position behind the fence. And so often their plans and our plans were never his plans to begin with. That was never the relationship he wanted for you. That was never the car, the debt that he wanted for you. That was never the career he wanted for you. Some of you need to hear it. That wasn't the grad school program that he had for you. See, God has a will. We have plans, but God has a will. And the way we begin to make great decisions is, it's not how hard we plan, but it's in whom we trust. Let me end it like this. See, there's a way that seems right to man, but in its end is destruction. What do I want you to do with this sermon is simple. I want you to plan with God. I want you to plan with God. This week or month or the next time you make a decision, make your decisions with God. I want you to include God, talk to God, seek God, think through the word with God, run it by the people of God, listen for the voice of God, and watch your world unravel in some amazing ways. See, we started out this story and we said, hey, you and I, we have a fence. And the reason why our position matters because the decisions we make on this side will either be life or death on that side. So how do we make better decisions? That's the question that we started with. My question, which is also an answer, is that depends on who you believe is on the other side of the fence. Who do you believe is on the other side of your fence? Who do you believe is orchestrating your steps, your plans, the good, perfect, and pleasing will? Who do you think is doing that? Because I would argue that it's the King of Kings and it's the Lord of Lords. It's the God who loves you. It's the God that is for you, that is not against you. It's the God that has thought about you before you were even thought about. It's the God that had plans for you while you were in your mother's wombs. It's the God that knew the number of hairs that were on your body. It's the God that has a plan to give you hope in the future and not disappoint you. It's a God that so loves you. And my ask tonight, or even today, is that for some of you, you got to know that God is willing. God is willing. Would you bow your head? Would you close your eyes? God is willing. I just remember this one story with the leper. I think it's Matthew 8, and this leper separated from the flock and isolated from people and has a condition that doesn't really get better but gets worse and ends in death. And this leper sees Jesus and he finally discovers that he's the one that holds his life together. And the leper goes to Jesus and he says, Lord, if you are willing, would you heal me? And here's what you need to see tonight. In the same way that the leper says to Jesus, are you willing? I know for some of you, when it comes to your sins, when it comes to the big things in your life, you're asking, Lord, are you willing? And this is what Jesus says. He says, I am willing. How do we know that? We see in the Garden of Gethsemane, in Jesus' final moments, before he would go to a cross, and the Bible says that while we were still in sin, Christ would die for us. Before that moment, he was in this moment, and he was crying, and he was sweating blood, and he was in this moment where it's like, God, like, is this your will? Is this your will? Is this the way? And this is what God, because of his great love for us, while we were still in sin, Christ would die. He would respond to the Father in obedience. He says, not my will, but may your will be done. And he would go to a cross, and he would pay a death so that you could have life.